Okay, so today we are talking about a part of geometry called logic. So this is a part that doesn't deal with the numbers and shapes like we normally have. It's just talking about words and how to manipulate them and apply this vocabulary. So this is your vocab sheet. And so just some basic stuff. Conditional statement is something written in if-then format. We'll look at examples of these on the next page. Hypothesis is following the word if. Okay, but not including it. Conclusion is following the word then, so the second part of the statement. Converse, we switch hypothesis and conclusion. Counterexample proves it wrong. So it's going to prove the conclusion wrong. Negation is just we deny it. Inverse is when we add not to the hypothesis and conclusion. And contrapositive is when we switch and add not. So if you flip over, this is going to be your reference page. Here is where it looks with when we actually have the statements. So conditional statement says, if it rains, then the game will be postponed. So our hypothesis is the if part without the word if. And we're going to circle hypothesis, it's also right here. Conclusion is the part following the word then. So we don't include the word then, just everything else. Okay? So the converse is when we just switch. So we take that first, if it rains, then the game will be postponed. So if the game is postponed, then it rained. We just switch hypothesis and conclusion. And it's not always true. There could be other, assuming this is true, if it rains then the game will be postponed, then this couldn't always be true. This would be our counterexample. And so if the game is postponed, well, the other team could have backed out. Okay? If it does not rain, then the game will not be postponed. So this is where we add not. So if it does not rain, the game will not be postponed. We add it to both parts. And again, it's not always true. We can have that same counterexample. But if the game is not postponed, so this is where we switch and add not. So if the game is not postponed, then it did not rain. And that is true, has the same level of truth as the first statement. So assuming that first statement is true, this is also true. Alright, so here we're just going to practice. It says circle the hypothesis, underline the conclusion, and then we're going to go through and write all the statements. So if you are 13, so you are 13 would be our hypothesis, then you are a teenager. That's true. A 13-year-old is a teenager. So converse is where we switch. So if you are a teenager, then you are 13. And so I would say for true or false now, I'm going to say that's false. And I can prove it is false because I can find the counterexample of if you are 16 or 18 or any other teenager. So you can be a teenager and not be 13. So now our inverse is when we just add not. So I go back to the original one and add not. So if you are not 13, then you are not a teenager. And again, that's going to be false with the same counterexamples before. We could be 16, we could be 17, we could be 14. So any of those other ages. And contrapositive is switch and not. And so if you are not a teenager, then you are not 13. And that one is true. If you're not a teenager, there's no way you can be 13. Alright, so now you're going to slide down and do this one yourself. So pause video and do yourself. And once you've done it, double check your answers by continuing. Okay, so hopefully you follow directions, pause the video, and work this out. So now take a minute and just check. Did you write it out this way? And did you identify that our converse and inverse are both false, because you could live somewhere else in the state but not be in Chicago? And then the last thing we have to do is come back, and it wants us to go ahead and identify our hypothesis and conclusion of every statement here. So remember, hypothesis, the if statement without the if, and conclusion, the then statement without the then. And we continue that pattern here. Okay, so then next you're going to do this. This is based off of that if you give a mouse a cookie book. So if you're doing this online, watch the video that's linked below. Otherwise, your teacher will show you the video or show you the book that you can read. And so you're just going to make a comic strip. Each box should contain a full if-then statement. Okay, so you'd have something like, if I go to school, then I will see my friends. If I see my friends, I will be happy, and then continue on like that. You can do whatever you want, just make sure it's school appropriate. And then on the back, you're going to flip it over and use this information to evaluate all the statements that you made. So that is your assignment for today.